I think Tiny Toon Adventures 2 is the single most disappointing game on the Famicom. The reason for that isn't in the game itself, it's in the physical cartridge. Tiny Toon Adventures 2 is the second and last game to use Konami's VRC-7 mapper chip. The chip that powered the amazing visuals and music in Lagrange Point. Konami had this powerful chip, put it in this cartridge, and seems to have only used it for its memory mapping functions. It appears that Tiny Toon Adventures 2 was intended for the US market, and Konami couldn't use the higher functions of the chip on the NES, and so the cartridge has this amazing tool built in that's effectively unused. They've got the Lamborghini of mapper chips, and are just driving it to the store for groceries. Tiny Toon Adventures was a cartoon that featured child analogs for Warner Brothers' famous cartoon characters. As the title suggests, this is Konami's second Famicom game based on them, and the first one was a relatively straightforward platformer. Tiny Toon Adventures 2 gets a bit weird with it. As the subtitle suggests, the villain of the series, Montana Max, has opened an amusement park and has invited all of the other characters to visit it. But it's a trap. They'll have to survive 4 deadly attractions before taking on Montana Max at his castle. So let's get this out of the way. There's only 4 stages here, and they're relatively short. They make up for their minuscule length by being exceptionally cruel. You are going to have to memorize these courses to have any chance of getting through. At least you can do these initial 4 stages in any order. In the upper left you have Hampton riding a train. Here A jumps and B does a belly slam. Hampton is the only one of these initial 4 characters who can attack enemies. His stage is the most straightforward. Just avoid running into obstacles or enemies, and eventually you'll reach the only boss in these first 4 stages. At one point, the front of the train separates, and if you're not at the very front edge of the screen, you're not going to make it. For most of these stages, the only thing you can collect is food. Food adds to your score, which actually does something in this game. To enter a stage, you have to have a certain number of tickets. You start with a few, but you get kicked out of the stage if you die, and if you wind up running low on tickets, you'll need to go to the central plaza where you can exchange your points for tickets. As long as you're not totally screwing up and are collecting food, it's actually really hard to run out of tickets. Lucky Duck's stage in the upper right-hand corner is the one stage that isn't a platformer, and so doesn't have additional points to collect. On the other hand, it's a bumper car track with point bumpers that you can rebound off of forever. On his stage, the B is the brakes, while A builds up a boost meter in the upper left. You can release it to do a small charge. Sometimes if you ram the bumpers enough, a POW will pop out, and when you've collected that POW, you can shove everyone else around a lot more. Your goal is to knock the 2 enemy bumper cars into the hole, while avoiding falling in the hole yourself. You have to go through 3 stages of this, and you essentially have 3 lives with which to complete the entire minigame. In the lower left you have Furball on the log flumes. Here you have a tiny platform that will move on its own, and the A button jumps while B button does nothing. This stage winds up being pretty difficult because there's some enemies that you'll have a hard time avoiding by jumping, but jumping is really your only option for avoiding enemies. You'll also find this segment where you'll ride on an elevator for a bit. The elevator automatically sinks down when you're not doing anything, and pressing A will make it rise up. In the lower right of the map, you have Babs Bunny on a roller coaster. Yet another small platform automatically moving through a course. A will jump, and B will flip the car upside down, having her hang from it. The coaster is probably the worst of the stages in terms of requiring that you memorize things. It moves so fast that you typically can't react to what's coming up. You just have to know it's there. And even if you know it's there, the timing on avoiding some obstacles is incredibly tight. If you clear all 4 of those courses, then you go to the final stage where you have Buster Bunny, no relation, going through a maze-like castle. Again, A jumps, and now B will do a spin dash. That move can attack enemies, and get you a bit of extra height and distance while you're jumping. Also, if you hold down B and move, Buster will run. This stage is just a matter of working out the path through the maze of doors, though some of them will flip you upside down for a while. There's one more collectible you can find on Buster's stage. There are a few hearts that will restore 1 health here. His stage is the only one that has these. I can't really say that Tiny Toon Adventures 2 is an unknown game in Japan, but at the same time, there wasn't a whole lot of enthusiasm one way or the other for it among the comments I could find. Nobody loved it, but nobody hated it. Although this is the last Tiny Toon Adventures game on the Famicom, and also the series aired its last original episode a week after the game was released, Tiny Toon Adventures does stick around and have a lot of other games based on it. For a while it was just one of those perpetual properties. My take is, I don't think Tiny Toon Adventures 2 is a very good game. What it comes down to is it's not a lot of fun to play those initial 4 stages. It's like the stale old joke at the restaurant. The gameplay is terrible, and there's so little of it. Once you're capable of beating the game, you can beat it in about 10 minutes. And that's without trying to rush things. It's just 5 very short stages, and the stages aren't very good. 3 stages where the level automatically moves. 2 of those you're on very tiny platforms and so can't really do anything. The bumper cars wind up being just a pain to control. Nothing works quite right with this one. The impression I take away from this game is that it was pushed out the door for those last-minute holiday sales. Konami knew that this was the last shot at making money with an original game on the Famicom, and released what they had when they hit the holiday season. Which really makes Tiny Toon Adventures 2 a disappointment in all respects.